The hall was not a big place, but it was full. Plastic chairs were placed in uneven rows, and the air carried a mix of excitement and boredom. People had come from nearby streets and neighborhoods, some with family members, some just to pass time. A small banner hung on the wall, announcing a local piano showcase. It was not a grand event, but to many, it still felt important. At the front of the hall stood an old piano. Its surface was scratched, and a few keys looked worn from years of use. It had seen many hands, many attempts, and many mistakes. To most people, it was just a piano. To a few, it was a chance to be noticed. Among the crowd sat a woman near the back. She chose a chair close to the wall, not wanting to stand out. Her clothes were simple and clean, but clearly old. She held her hands together in her lap, fingers lightly touching, as if she were calming herself. Her eyes often moved toward the piano, then quickly away, as if she did not want anyone to notice her interest. People around her chatted freely. Some laughed loudly. Others talked about the earlier performances. A young man nearby joked that the best part of the event was already over. Another person complained about how long the program was. No one seemed to notice the quiet woman sitting among them. Her name was written near the bottom of the performance list. When people glanced at it, they barely reacted. Some shrugged. A few smiled in a way that suggested low expectations. One woman whispered to her friend that it was probably someone new or someone filling time. They both laughed softly. The quiet woman heard it all. She always did. Over the years, she had learned how to listen without reacting. Her face stayed calm, but inside, old memories began to stir. She remembered being a child, standing outside a small music school, listening through an open window. She remembered the sound of piano notes drifting into the street, clear and beautiful. She had stood there for hours sometimes, even when her legs hurt. She never had money for lessons. She never had a piano at home. What she had was time, patience, and a deep love for the sound. As the program continued, one performer after another took the stage. Some played well. Some made mistakes. Each received polite applause. The host smiled and kept things moving. Checking the list after each performance, the confident players walked to the piano with pride. Their posture was strong. Their expressions were sure. They bowed before sitting down. The crowd responded warmly, clapping before the first note was even played, after one particularly energetic performance. The applause lasted longer than usual. The performer stood up, smiling wide, clearly pleased. He glanced around the room, enjoying the attention. As he walked back to his seat, he noticed the quiet woman sitting near the back. His eyes rested on her for a second, then he looked away with a slight smirk. The quiet woman lowered her gaze. She felt familiar feelings rise in her chest. Not anger, not jealousy. Just a calm sadness mixed with determination. The host checked the list again and called the next name. There were a few groans from the audience. Some people shifted in their seats. A few reached for their phones. The quiet woman stood up. The movement was small, but those nearby noticed. A man raised his eyebrows. Someone else leaned toward a friend and whispered, asking if she was really going to play. Another person smiled as if expecting entertainment of the wrong kind. She walked slowly toward the front. Each step felt heavy, but she kept going. Her shoes made soft sounds against the floor. She could feel eyes on her back, curious and doubtful. As she reached the piano, the host looked surprised. He hesitated for a moment, then forced a polite smile and stepped aside. No introduction followed. No encouragement. Just a brief silence. The quiet woman stood beside the piano. She did not bow right away. She placed her hand gently on the edge of the instrument, feeling the rough surface beneath her fingers. For a moment, she closed her eyes. In that short pause, memories flooded her mind. Long nights practicing on borrowed instruments, early mornings cleaning offices to earn a little money, sitting alone in empty halls after everyone had gone home, playing softly so no one would complain, being told again and again that music was not a real path for someone like her. She opened her eyes and sat down. The bench creaked slightly under her weight. She adjusted her position, moving closer to the keys. Her hands hovered above them, steady but cautious. The room was quiet now, not because of respect but because of uncertainty. People waited, unsure of what they were about to hear. Some expected wrong notes. Others expected something dull. She took a slow breath. Her fingers touched the keys, but she did not play right away. That pause stretched longer than expected. A few people shifted uncomfortably. Someone coughed inside her. Something settled. The noise of the room faded. The doubts, the whispers, the laughter all became distant. What remained was the piano and the story she had carried for years. She pressed the first key. The sound was soft, almost fragile. It floated through the hall gently. A second note followed, then another. The melody moved slowly, like someone walking carefully through memories. At first, people barely reacted. But as the notes continued, something began to change. Conversations stopped. Phones were lowered. Heads turned toward the piano. The quiet woman's face remained calm, but her hands spoke clearly. Each movement was controlled, confident, and full of feeling. The music did not rush. It took its time, inviting the listener in. A woman in the front row leaned forward. A man crossed his arms, then slowly relaxed them. The confident performer, who had smiled earlier, frowned slightly, his attention now fully captured. The melody grew deeper. It carried sadness, hope, and strength all at once. It was not just a performance. It felt like a life being told through sound. The room, once restless and careless, now held its breath, and the quiet woman continued to play, unaware that this was only the beginning of a moment that would change everything. The hall remained quiet as the soft notes floated and filled the space. People who had been talking earlier now sat frozen in their seats, unsure of how to react. They had come expecting a simple performance, be even something mediocre to pass the time. But what they heard was different. It was not just music. It was a story spoken without words, echoing through every corner of the room. Some faces in the audience showed surprise. A few people whispered to each other, their eyes wide, trying to understand what they were hearing. One man, who had been joking with his friend just moments before, now leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. He stared at the piano with a mix of curiosity and disbelief. Even the confident performer from earlier, the one who had smirked at her, stopped moving. His smile disappeared, replaced by a frown that hinted at worry and amazement. He had thought talent was measured by showiness and speed, but this was different. The quiet woman played not for attention, not for applause, but for the music itself. Each note had meaning. Each pause carried emotion. In the back of the room, a woman who had whispered to her friend about the performer being a filler looked uncomfortable. She could not look away, not because she wanted to, but because she had been caught off guard. Her friend nudged her, whispering something, but even she could not find words. It was as if the music had spoken for everyone, saying things that no one could put into sentences. The quiet woman continued, her fingers gliding over the keys with gentle precision. The notes rose and fell, soft and strong, slow and fast, like waves moving across a quiet sea. There was sadness in some parts, joy in others, and always honesty. It was impossible to look at her and imagine that she had been underestimated. The music itself demanded respect. A few children in the audience, who had been fidgeting and whispering to each other, now sat still. They listened, fascinated. One small boy whispered to his mother, "Mom, is she really that good?" His mother simply smiled, not interrupting, letting him soak in the music. It was a rare thing for them to see someone play with such feeling and control. The confident performer, who had been so sure of himself, shifted in his seat. He crossed his arms and leaned back, eyes fixed on her hands. For the first time, he felt something he had not felt before: doubt. He had always been told he was talented, but this woman, quiet and unassuming, showed him a different kind of talent, one born from patience, dedication, and a deep connection to the music itself. The audience began to notice small details: the way her fingers curved around the keys, the slight tilt of her head when she concentrated, the way her eyes closed sometimes as if she were remembering something distant. Each movement seemed effortless, yet behind it was a lifetime of practice and persistence. Some people shifted in their seats, leaning in as if they could feel the music more closely, as if being closer to her would reveal the secret of her skill. A few elderly people, who had seen countless performances over the years, exchanged glances. They nodded slightly at each other, recognizing the level of talent in front of them. It was rare, even for seasoned performers, to play with such emotion and control at the same time. They had learned to recognize true skill, and now they were witnesses to it. Meanwhile, the quiet woman played on, unaware of the growing attention. She was not thinking about the audience or the reaction. Her focus was entirely on the music, on the story she was telling through the piano. Each note was deliberate, each chord carefully chosen. She was sharing a part of herself that she had kept hidden for years, a part that few people had ever seen or heard. In the middle of her performance, there was a sudden shift in the music. The melody became more urgent, more alive. It seemed to reach into the hearts of everyone in the room, demanding their full attention. Some people gasped softly. A few had tears in their eyes, though they tried to hide it. The music had a power that could not be ignored, and it was impossible not to feel it. The children in the audience now sat perfectly still. They had never heard anything like this before. It was not just a song. It was a story about struggle, about hope, about courage. They could sense that this was someone who had worked hard, who had fought to be heard. It was a lesson in perseverance, and it reached them without words. The confident performer's expression continued to change. His eyes narrowed, his lips pressed together. He had always believed that confidence and flair were enough to impress an audience, but now he realized he had been wrong. Talent was deeper than that. It was quiet, persistent, and unyielding. And she, the quiet woman who had walked in so humbly, was showing it in full. Some people in the audience began to shift in their seats, moving closer together. They whispered softly, unsure if they should disturb the moment, sharing thoughts like, "I didn't expect this," or "She's amazing." It was as if the music had captured their attention so completely that nothing else mattered. The usual distractions, the phones, the side conversations, the jokes had vanished. The quiet woman's hands moved faster now, gliding over the keys with increasing confidence. The melody became more complex, yet she played it with ease. Her eyes still closed, and a slight smile touched her lips. She was not showing off. She was simply expressing herself, letting the music tell the story that words could not in the audience. A young man who had been skeptical now leaned forward, resting his chin on his hand. He could feel the emotion in every note. He had come to the event thinking it would be dull, but now he was captivated. He realized he had underestimated her, just as so many others had, and he felt a pang of regret for his own judgment. The hall, which had once been filled with casual chatter and laughter, now held a rare silence. Everyone was listening, not just with their ears, but with their hearts. The music spoke to something deep inside each person, evoking memories, feelings, and dreams they had not touched in years. It was a shared experience, yet deeply personal for each listener. The confident performer shifted in his seat again. He could not look away. He realized that the quiet woman was not just good, she was extraordinary. Her technique was flawless, but it was the emotion, the connection to the music, that set her apart. He had never seen anything like it. He felt a mix of admiration and humility. The melody softened for a moment, delicate and gentle. It reminded the audience of calm mornings, quiet streets, and simple joys. Some people closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them. The children leaned against their parents, sensing the emotion without needing words. The adults felt a weight lift from their hearts, carried away by the sound. Then, music shifted again, this time becoming powerful and commanding. The notes rose, filling the hall with energy and life. It was impossible not to feel the strength behind each movement. The quiet woman's hands flew across the keys, yet every note was precise, every chord intentional. It was as if she were speaking directly to each person in the room, telling them to pay attention, to feel, to understand. People in the audience began to whisper again, but this time with awe. "She's incredible," one person said. Another shook their head in disbelief. Even those who had doubted her earlier were now fully captivated. The room had transformed from a casual gathering into a space of respect and wonder. The confident performer finally leaned back, his arms uncrossed, his mind racing. He had been so sure of himself, but now he understood that true talent was not about confidence or showmanship alone. It was about heart, dedication, and a willingness to share something deeply personal. And she, the quiet woman, had all of that in abundance. The quiet woman continued to play, lost in the music. She had no idea how much she had already affected the audience. She was not playing for recognition or praise. She was playing because it was part of her, a language she had learned to speak long before anyone had believed in her. Every note carried her story, her struggles, and her triumphs. As the performance reached its peak, the audience sat on the edge of their seats, completely absorbed. The children were silent, the adults were still, and even the confident performer could only watch in awe. The music spoke to everyone in its own way, touching emotions that had been hidden or forgotten. The hall felt smaller, more intimate, even though it was filled with people. It was as if the music had drawn them together, creating a shared experience that transcended words. Everyone felt connected, not just to the music, but to the quiet woman at the piano, to her story and to each other. And through it all, she played on, unaware of the impact she was having. She did not play to impress or to compete. She played because it was who she was, because the piano was her voice when words were not enough. The audience watched in silence, realizing that they were witnessing something rare and extraordinary, something that would stay with them long after the last note faded. The music continued, now deeper, richer, and more expressive. Every note seemed to carry a weight that could not be ignored. The quiet woman's hands moved with precision, her fingers striking the keys with confidence yet tenderness. It was a performance born not only from skill, but from countless hours of dedication, struggle, and love for the piano. Each movement told a story, and the audience could feel it even without understanding the words behind it. The room had completely transformed. The laughter, the whispers, the doubts, everything had faded. It was as if the music had created a new space, one where only the sound and the emotions it carried existed. The audience leaned forward instinctively, drawn into the story unfolding in front of them. Their eyes followed her fingers as they danced across the keys, watching her bring life to something that had long been hidden from view. In the front row, an elderly woman closed her eyes. She had lived many years, seen many performances, but this one touched her in a way few ever had. Her hands rested lightly on her lap, and a faint smile appeared on her face as she felt herself being carried away by the music. Every note resonated with her own memories, times of joy, of loss, of quiet moments alone at home. It was as if the music spoke directly to her heart, understanding feelings she could not express. The children, too, were captivated. They had been restless at the start, whispering and fidgeting, but now they were still, their eyes wide with awe. One little girl leaned toward her mother, whispering, "Mom, how can she make the piano sound like that?" Her mother shook her head, unable to answer. Words were not enough to explain what they were experiencing. The music itself was teaching them something about patience, emotion, and the beauty of quiet dedication. The confident performer who had smirked earlier now sat rigid in his seat. His face showed a mix of shock and admiration. He had always believed that showmanship and speed could win an audience, but this performance was different. It was not about speed or technical tricks. It was about heart, soul, and connection. He realized, perhaps for the first time, that true talent was not always loud or flashy. It could be quiet, unassuming, and still leave everyone speechless. The quiet woman's posture did not change. Her focus never wavered. She played as if the piano were an extension of herself, each chord expressing thoughts and feelings she had carried for years. Her hands moved with elegance and control, striking keys with precision, but also with sensitivity. The music was alive, breathing, and it seemed to respond to her every thought and emotion. Around the room, people were beginning to notice small details they had missed before. the slight tilts of her head as she concentrated, the subtle movement of her fingers over the black keys, the way her eyes occasionally closed as if remembering something personal, every detail added to the impact of her performance. It was no longer just about the music. It was about her, the life she had lived, and the story she was telling through her art. A man in the middle of the hall shifted in his seat. He had been skeptical, thinking this would be just another local performance, nothing special. But now, he felt a strange mix of awe and humility. He could sense the years of effort and patience behind each note. He realized that talent like this was rare, and witnessing it was a privilege. He looked around, seeing that others shared his reaction, though each person experienced it in their own way. The quiet woman's music began to swell, becoming more powerful and commanding. The notes rose, filling the room with an energy that could not be ignored. People instinctively straightened in their seats, some even holding their breath as the melody reached a crescendo. There was no need for applause, no need for words. The room itself seemed to recognize the importance of the moment. A young boy near the back whispered to his father, "Dad, she's amazing." "How does she do that?" His father placed a hand on his son's shoulder, squeezing gently. "It's not just skill," he said softly. "It's something inside her. Something she's been carrying for a long time." The boy nodded, still mesmerized by the sounds coming from the piano. The confident performer could no longer deny the impact. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, watching her hands move across the keys. He could feel the emotion in every chord, the thoughtfulness behind every pause. He had spent years practicing, performing, and competing, but he had never seen someone use music to communicate in such a raw and powerful way. He felt humbled, even intimidated. The audience continued to react subtly. Heads turned, eyes widened, and some hands moved instinctively toward their chests, as if to feel the music more deeply. A few people whispered, sharing their thoughts quietly, not wanting to break the spell. "I didn't expect this," one person murmured. Another shook their head in disbelief, saying nothing, simply letting the music wash over them. The melody shifted again, this time softer, more introspective. It spoke of quiet moments of reflection, of the times when life felt heavy and difficult. People felt the emotions without fully understanding them. Some closed their eyes, imagining their own lives intertwined with the music. Memories of childhood, first loves, losses, and victories all seemed to blend with the notes she played. The children leaned closer to their parents, sensing the emotion in the air. They had never encountered anything like this. It was as if the music could tell a story without words, and everyone, young and old, understood it in their own way. The quiet woman had become a storyteller, not with voice, but with sound, touching hearts without ever speaking. The confident performer, now fully absorbed, could no longer maintain his composure. His earlier arrogance had faded, replaced by genuine admiration. He understood that this was not a competition. It was a revelation. Talent like this did not ask for recognition. It demanded attention by simply existing. And she, so humble and unassuming, had captured it completely. As the performance continued, the room seemed to shrink. People leaned forward instinctively, drawn in by the story the music was telling. It was impossible to look away. Even those who had come with doubts, jokes, or distractions were now fully engaged. The quiet woman had turned the hall into a sacred space, where every listener became part of her story. The melody grew faster now, intricate and lively, yet controlled. It was a demonstration of both technical skill and emotional depth. Every note was intentional, every pause meaningful. It was impossible to ignore the dedication and practice that had gone into this performance. The audience could sense the years of struggle behind every chord, the silent victories that had led to this moment. Some people held their breath as the music reached its peak. It was both exhilarating and moving, a combination of strength and vulnerability. The quiet woman's eyes remained closed, her body swaying slightly with the rhythm. She was not playing for applause or recognition. She was sharing a part of herself, a piece of her soul that had been waiting for the right moment to emerge. The children were completely still now, captivated beyond words. They could feel the emotions, even if they did not fully understand them. The adults in the room were similarly affected, many unable to hide the tears forming in their eyes. The music was a mirror, reflecting the emotions of the audience back at them. Creating a shared experience of beauty and humanity, the confident performer finally exhaled deeply, realizing he had been wrong to judge her before. True talent was not always visible or loud. Sometimes it was quiet, patient, and deeply personal. And she had proven that with every note, every pause, every subtle movement. The quiet woman's hands moved with increasing intensity, yet each chord remained precise. The melodies soared, filling the room completely. It was a powerful declaration of her journey, her dedication, and her love for music. The audience could not help but be swept away, feeling every emotion she conveyed through the piano as the final moments approached. The melody softened, becoming gentle and reflective once more. It was a reminder that the journey, no matter how intense, always had moments of peace and introspection. The audience listened, held in the balance between awe and quiet admiration. The quiet woman's story, told through music, had touched everyone in the room, leaving a lasting impression that would not fade with time. The quiet woman's final notes hung in the air like a soft echo, and for a few moments, the hall remained completely still. No one moved, no one whispered, no one dared to breathe too loudly. The music had filled every corner of the room, leaving a weight of emotion that was impossible to ignore. People were sitting frozen, absorbing the depth of what they had just witnessed. The children were wide-eyed, unable to speak. They had experienced something beyond their understanding, yet it had touched them deeply. One little girl leaned against her mother, whispering, "I've never heard anything so beautiful." Her mother nodded, squeezing her shoulder gently, feeling the same astonishment. They could not fully articulate their feelings, but the music had left a mark on them that would stay. The confident performer, who had previously believed he was the most talented in the room, now sat in silence, humbled. He could not look away, his eyes following her hands as they left the keys. The realization struck him fully. This woman had transformed the entire room with her music. He had judged her unfairly, assuming that her quiet demeanor meant she lacked skill. Now he understood how wrong he had been. There was a humility in him that had not been there before, an acknowledgement of true talent. The audience began to stir, slowly at first, as if afraid to break the spell. Then, one clap rang out from the front row. It was tentative, almost shy, but soon it was joined by others. A ripple of applause moved through the hall, growing stronger, louder, until everyone was clapping and cheering. People were standing, some clapping so hard their hands ached, some wiping away tears they had not realized had fallen. The applause was not just for the music, but for the courage, dedication, passion behind it. The quiet woman, still seated, allowed herself a small, gentle smile. She did not bow immediately, did not raise her hands for applause. Her eyes scanned the audience briefly, and she could see the astonishment, admiration, and newfound respect on every face. She felt a mixture of relief and quiet pride. For years, she had been underestimated, laughed at, and doubted, but in this moment, her story had been heard without words. A few people approached her after the applause, their voices filled with awe and sincerity. They praised her skill, asked how long she had practiced, and admitted that they had never expected such talent. Some apologized for their earlier judgments, their voices tinged with embarrassment. She nodded graciously, thanking them softly, never allowing pride to overshadow her humility. The confident performer finally stood and approached her, his hands clasped in front of him. He looked genuinely moved, a mixture of respect and apology in his eyes. "I underestimated you," he admitted quietly. "I should have known better." "That was incredible," she nodded, acknowledging his words without a hint of resentment. There was no need for rivalry here, only understanding and shared appreciation. The children gathered around after a moment. Shyly at first, then more boldly, wanting to ask questions. To understand how someone could make music sound so alive, she spoke to them gently, answering their curiosity with kindness, sharing small pieces of wisdom about practice, patience, and believing in oneself. The lesson was not just about music. It was about life, perseverance, and the power of quiet determination. The elderly woman in the front row, who had closed her eyes during the performance, stood and approached her as well. She reached out to touch her hand lightly, a gesture of respect and gratitude. "You reminded me of why I fell in love with music," she said softly. "I haven't felt that in years." The quiet woman bowed her head slightly, acknowledging the words, feeling the deep connection that music could create between people of all ages. Around the hall, conversations began to bloom, not in the noisy, distracted way they had earlier, but in soft, reflective tones. People spoke about the performance, their emotions, and how it had affected them. Some shared personal stories that the music had brought to mind. It was as if the hall itself had been transformed into a space where hearts could speak freely, where emotions could be shared without fear or judgment. The host of the event, who had been nervous and uncertain about her performance, finally approached her with genuine admiration. He shook her hand firmly, praising her talent and professionalism. "I didn't expect this," he admitted, his voice filled with surprise. "You've truly changed the way we all see music." She nodded humbly, accepting the compliment without seeking to dominate the attention. Her goal had never been recognition. It had always been the music itself. The confident performer stayed nearby, observing the reactions of the audience and reflecting on his own preconceptions. He realized that true talent was often quiet, subtle, and deeply personal. It was not about showiness or arrogance. It was about honesty, dedication, the willingness to share one's soul through art. He felt a mixture of humility and inspiration, understanding that he still had much to learn from someone who had never sought validation. Some audience members approached her later, asking for lessons, advice, or tips on improving their own musical abilities. She spoke to them with patience, emphasizing the importance of perseverance, practice, and belief in oneself. She explained that talent alone was not enough. It needed to be nurtured with patience, time, and genuine passion. Her words carried as much weight as her performance had, and people listened intently, absorbing not just the technical advice, but the life lessons she shared. The children lingered longer, not wanting to leave. They asked her to play again, to show them more, to explain how music could feel so alive. She indulged them, playing small pieces softly, allowing them to see the connection between patience, practice, and expression. It was a moment of inspiration, planting seeds that would grow in the young minds for years to come. Even those who had been skeptical at first could not deny the impact. They approached her with newfound respect, acknowledging their earlier misjudgments. There was a humility in them now, a recognition that true talent and dedication often go unnoticed until it is allowed to shine. The quiet woman had taught them a lesson far beyond music. Never underestimate someone based on appearances, demeanor, or the first impression. The room, once filled with casual chatter and mild distractions, had been transformed into a space of reflection, admiration, and learning. The performance had not just been an event. It had been a revelation. People left with a deeper appreciation for music, for dedication, and for the quiet strength that often goes unnoticed in the world. She gathered her belongings slowly, allowing herself a few moments to absorb the reactions. There was no rush, no sense of urgency. The applause had faded, but the respect remained. People continued to speak in hushed tones, reflecting on what they had experienced. She felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing that her journey, her struggles, and her love for music had been recognized without needing to demand attention. The confident performer approached her once more, this time with a small notebook in his hands. He had been inspired, realizing that learning from someone like her was a rare opportunity. They spoke briefly about technique, practice, and expression, sharing insights without competition. It was a moment of mutual respect, a recognition that talent was not a contest, but a shared gift. As the hall emptied, people continued to talk, sharing stories of how the performance had touched them. Some felt a sense of hope, inspired to pursue their own passions. Others reflected on the patience and persistence that had brought the quiet woman to this moment. The impact was not just immediate. It would resonate with them for a long time. The quiet woman left the stage slowly, her steps light and steady. She did not seek the spotlight, did not look for accolades. Her satisfaction came from knowing that she had shared her story, her music, and her heart with those willing to listen. And in doing so, she had not only silenced doubt and mockery, but she had also created a space where respect, admiration, and inspiration could flourish. The quiet woman stepped out of the hall slowly, her footsteps light but certain. Outside, the evening air was cool, and the faint sounds of the city drifted around her. She carried no trophies, no certificates, no loud accolades. Yet inside, she felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She had done something that mattered, not for herself alone, but for everyone who had been present to witness it. The applause, the awe, the respect, these were not fleeting moments. They were seeds planted in the hearts of those who had watched and listened. People had come with low expectations, some even mocking, but she had shown them the power of quiet persistence, dedication, and true talent. She walked slowly, taking in the reactions she could still see through the open doors of the hall. Groups of people lingered, still discussing what they had witnessed. Some had tears in their eyes. Others had smiles that would not fade quickly. She reflected on her journey. The years of practicing alone in small rooms, the long nights when only the moon was her witness, the hours spent perfecting a melody she could barely hear herself in a noisy world. She thought about the times she had been laughed at, the times doors had closed in her face, and the countless moments of doubt that she had quietly endured. All of it had led to this night. A night where her music had spoken louder than any words ever could. She thought about the children who had watched her with wide eyes, who had leaned toward their parents in awe. She imagined the inspiration that might take root in their hearts, the small spark of possibility that could grow into a love for music, patience, and perseverance. It reminded her of herself as a child, standing outside windows, listening to music she could not yet play, dreaming of a day when she would have the chance to share her own story. The confident performer had approached her multiple times after the show, each conversation a lesson in humility, learning, and understanding. He had admitted to underestimating her, and she had accepted his words with kindness. There was no need for resentment, no room for competition. Her goal had never been to outshine anyone, but to express herself fully and honestly. In doing so, she had inadvertently inspired even those who thought they were her equals or competitors. She paused outside the hall, taking a deep breath. The cool air felt refreshing against her skin. She watched people leaving, some walking slowly, still processing what they had experienced. Conversations hummed softly, full of admiration and reflection. Even strangers to each other shared a moment of connection, united by the music they had just heard. It was rare, this kind of communal experience. She felt grateful to have been the center of it without ever seeking the attention. The streets were quieting down now. Shops were closing, and the evening lights cast long shadows on the pavement. She walked slowly, carrying her small bag, feeling the calm satisfaction of someone who had worked tirelessly and finally seen a result that mattered. It was not fame, not recognition, not applause, though those had been plentiful. It was the deep knowledge that she had stayed true to herself and her passion. As she walked, she thought about the people who had doubted her. She did not feel anger toward them. Instead, she felt a quiet empathy. They had not known her story, had not understood the years of dedication that shaped her skill. Now, they had witnessed it, and the respect she had earned was genuine. It was a reminder that people often judge before they see, and yet the truth has a way of revealing itself in time. She passed a small park and saw children playing in the fading light. Their laughter reminded her of the innocence and curiosity that music had always inspired in her. She remembered her own childhood, the hours spent alone, learning to play with determination, often imagining audiences she would one day touch with her music. Those dreams had guided her for years, and tonight, they had come true in a way she could never have fully imagined. The quiet woman thought about the elderly woman who had approached her after the performance, the one who had said she had reminded her why she loved music. Their brief conversation had been meaningful, a passing of understanding between generations. It reinforced the idea that talent, when shared honestly and sincerely, has the power to connect people across time, age, and experience. She reached her small apartment, the familiar sights and smells greeting her. It was modest, but it was hers, a space where she could practice, think, and create without interruption. She set her bag down, removed her coat, and walked toward the small piano tucked in the corner of the room. Her fingers hovered above the keys, not to perform, but simply to feel the connection once more. She played a few soft notes, a gentle reflection of the evening, letting the music carry her through her thoughts in those quiet moments. She reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She remembered the times when others had laughed at her, the teachers who had doubted her, the peers who had dismissed her potential. She had endured, persisted, and believed in herself, even when no one else did. And now, after this performance, she realized that respect earned through perseverance is far more meaningful than respect given out of fear or obligation. Her mind drifted to the confident performer once more. She thought about the humility he had shown, the way he had approached her, and the conversations they had shared. There is a lesson in that as well. Talent and pride are not enough without understanding, empathy, and a willingness to learn from others. She felt a quiet satisfaction knowing that even those who had doubted her could now recognize her true abilities. The night grew darker, and the city around her began to quiet. She sat down at her piano and allowed herself a few more minutes of music. This time, there was no audience, no pressure, no need to prove anything. The music was hers alone, a private celebration of her journey, her dedication, and the quiet triumph of staying true to herself. As she played, she thought about the future. There would be more performances, more opportunities to share her music, more chances to inspire others quietly and sincerely. She knew that her path would not always be easy, that challenges and doubts would continue to appear. But she also knew that her perseverance, her love for music, and her willingness to stay true to herself would carry her through. The quiet woman allowed her thoughts to wander, reflecting on the subtle power of patience and determination. She thought about all the moments when she had chosen to practice rather than rest, to persist rather than give up, to believe rather than doubt. Each choice had led her here, to this moment of quiet triumph, and she felt a deep sense of gratitude for every struggle and challenge along the way. She played one final chord, letting it resonate through the small apartment. The sound lingered, soft and full, a gentle reminder of the evening and everything it had represented. She sat back, her hands resting lightly on the keys, and smiled. The music had spoken, and it had been heard. The respect she had earned, the admiration she had inspired, and the connection she had created were far more meaningful than any words could express. The quiet woman leaned back in her chair, closing her eyes for a moment. She thought about the people who had been present at the hall, the children who had been inspired, the adults who had been moved, and even the confident performer who had learned a lesson in humility. Each of them carried a piece of that evening with them, and she carried it too. It was a shared moment, one that would resonate in ways she could not fully see. She rose slowly, stretching her arms above her head, and felt a sense of calm satisfaction. The world outside continued on, as it always did, but inside her, there was a quiet peace. She had shown that talent, patience, and dedication could speak louder than words, that the quietest people often carry the strongest gifts, and that respect and admiration are best earned through action rather than demands. The night grew still, and she looked out the window, seeing the distant lights of the city twinkle against the darkness. She felt a sense of connection, not just to the people she had touched that evening, but to the larger world, to the possibilities that lay ahead, and to the enduring power of music to inspire, heal, and unite. And in that quiet moment, she knew that she had found her place. Not through recognition or fame, but through the simple, profound act of sharing her gift with those willing to listen.